I think South Africa is a patriarchal society. It's entrenched patriarchy in our society that, it's not uncommon to find a single mother who brings up a child, but still entrenches the fact that she's a boy, she's not supposed to do certain things. And that's where it starts, because I think the sooner we begin to appreciate that when we bring up our kids, we should bring them irrespective of whether it's a girl child or the boy child, because sometimes we entrench patriarchy at its very early stages. And I think this is what we are grappling with today. You find men, young men for that matter, who are not even able to appreciate a human being who happens to be a girl because of the upbringing. The sooner we bring up our boy child to respect a girl, I think we would be making progress. But I think, unfortunately, our society is just anchored in the patriarchal nature of how we bring up the society in general. Our stance as government emanates from our constitution. Our constitution entrenches the right of South Africans. It entrenches the rights of all its citizens to be equal in everything that we do. And that is why you will find that in our policies, we do put the emphasis that we need to begin to address the inequalities that constituted the history of our country, where women were seen to be inferior to the men. And I think our constitution is that we should make sure that it does happen. I think for people who are in the public service, who are meant to implement the policies of this country, it is upon us to make sure that that happens, that women have equal human rights like any other person. I think all of us have got a responsibility. I think if you recall 2 or 3 years ago, the initiative that was started by, in fact, I think we have to say also, by male in GCIS to say we want to come out and be heard, because I think this conversation is incomplete if it is done by women only. We have to stand up as men and also start participating. Men have a role to play, because women don't abuse each other. Women don't get molested by themselves. They are actually molested by men. And it is, for me, I want to say there are a lot of good men out there, but their goodness becomes nothing if they don't come out and say we want to participate in making sure that we assist our male friends, male colleagues that are abusive. We have to take a stand and participate, because I think this conversation will be incomplete, as you correctly say, that if it is a campaign that is run by women. Yes, we have an interest because we think that we must fight for our space, but I think we would be making more progress if we get more men who participate in this fight, because all of us have a responsibility to this constitution that regards all of us as human beings. I think the Tutuzela centers are centers that are playing a role. Very often you would find a woman who's in distress, wants to get out, doesn't know how to navigate through this whole thing. There's some issues in families who will say, no, you have to stay. We paid lobola, so you have to try and make it work. And these Tutuzela centers offer those women who have already taken a stand to say, I want to get out and I want a place where I can start rebuilding myself. And the Tutuzela centers have got that role that they play. And I think they have to be there, they have to be resourced, and the more we have, the better, because I think the challenge that we have now, because of the crisis we have of abuse of women, these centers are not even sufficient, and more women want these shelters so that they can begin to find a place where they can rebuild their lives and start all over again. So they play a role. The Tutuzela centers are not the only solution. I think for us to deal with this issue, there has to be consequences to those who are arrested. One of the issues that women have always said is that, yes, when you go to the police station, there are no consequences. Instead, you find men who also just think it's a game. And the government has said we need to begin to train our police stations. We have to train champion policemen who understand when a woman comes in there to report a rape or an assault, they are taken seriously. And that's the beginning of making women to feel comfortable to go and report. Because some of them, they don't go and report because of how the issues get trivialized when they get to the police station, and what government has been at pains in trying to do through our police station, that we have to have that kind of sensitivity in those police stations. The third area that we also as government have got to do, once a person has been arrested, there has to be some kind of speedy response. The government has put in place to say we must have sexual offences court that will make sure that the turnaround time of emitting justice to those who commit crime, it does happen. So there is an attempt to do that. A number of police stations, courts, they are beginning to build sexual offences court. Again, it is an attempt to make sure that there is some intervention in that area. So for me, I think for us to make progress, there has to be consequences. There has to be places of shelter where women want to. But thirdly, there has to be men, every one of us, who contribute in bringing up that child, because it starts there. If we don't change this behavior that is so patriarchal in our society, where they see women or girl child as inferior, then we are not going to actually nip it in the bud. Because for me, that's where it starts. How do we bring up that boy child? How do we support women who want to get out? And how do we deal with the consequences when you have taken that stand to go and report? How do you make sure that there is justice? And that's the beginning of that chain of making sure that the women are empowered. But importantly also, the economic aspect of it. I think as government, we have to make sure that the women businesses or women who starting businesses for themselves, we have to begin to support those initiatives where women are beginning to empower themselves. They are starting their own businesses, they are starting their own cooperatives. Those are elements that we should be putting in place and making sure that they happen. There's been a lot of very painful stories of young girls who have been brutalized in universities. The most horrific stories where you don't expect boys to actually abuse women in the manner that they abuse them. And I think this framework is beginning to force some of these institutions to put in place processes and raising the awareness. It's not okay to say this girl was raped by some other students. It means the institutions are not doing enough to begin to educate those young boys who are also battling with their own issues to say it is not okay. So this policy framework is beginning to put in place a system where the girl students are going to be protected, male that are in those universities are going to be assisted to appreciate why girls are in those universities. They are there to learn like them. They are supposed to be protected and respected. So this policy framework is a very important initiative by the Minister of Higher Education and Learning to put in place, and it's going to be, even what is good with this framework is that it also forces monitoring mechanisms that yes, you may have a policy, but there has to be measures to make sure that it is monitored, and it does happen. It also proposes a budget of raising awareness and educating the learners in those universities to respect women when they are in those institutions. So for me, I think it's one very useful initiative given the challenges that we have of abuse of young women in these institutions. I think as I conclude, I'd like to use this opportunity to express my deepest condolences to the families of those young girls. No parent would want to bury their child. And today we sit back and we are saying that we still have young girls who get killed by men. And I hope we will continue the conversation of saying we all have a responsibility to make sure that justice is served for all those who have perpetrated the most gruesome killings that we have seen over the last week or two.